California's been hurting for rain the last few years, but some scientists say they should get ready for a flood of biblical proportions. SFGate reports that with the huge amount of rainfall hitting the Golden State recently, a 2011 study that depicts a catastrophic megastorm is getting more attention. The study, by the United States Geological Survey, suggests that California suffers a massive flood every 100 to 200 years. The best known example of this is the Great Flood of 1862. For around a month, the West Coast was pummeled with constant rain. It was so bad, Sacramento was all but submerged. A local paper reported that 1,400 Chinese immigrants and 800,000 cattle died as a result of the flooding. Sacramento was hit by at least 2 more monster floods after the Great Flood. It was bad enough that Congress authorized major flood control projects in 1910. So while this surge of rain is helping with California's drought problem, it makes sense to be careful what you wish for.
Next tonight here, the major concern near America's tallest dam, a giant hole in the spillway, is growing in size tonight.
Tonight, officials in California have the nation's tallest dam under a microscope, worried about this massive hole that's formed nearby. The Oroville Dam holds water back from Lake Oroville, now at record levels and in danger of spilling over after a series of storms. The 200-foot-long, 30-foot-deep hole is enormous, dwarfing the engineers who climbed in for a look this week. It eroded through the concrete spillway used to release water and keep the lake from topping its banks.
This is a big deal. We're very concerned that we manage this properly to protect the public down below.
Here's the problem. If the spillway can't release enough water now, officials will have to try a never-before-used emergency spillway.
We're monitoring 24/7. If any changes occur that could result in any kind of danger to the public, we will immediately notify the public.
Officials tonight stressed that the dam is safe now that conditions are improving. The sky is cleared and the rains have stopped, but they are keeping a close eye on this one, David.
A powerful earthquake in the southern Philippines has killed at least 6 people and injured nearly 100 others. The earthquake measured a magnitude 6.7, according to the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology. It shook the country's southern region late on Friday. The quake's epicenter was close to the city of Surigao at a relatively shallow depth of 11 kilometers. Hundreds of residents fled to safety as buildings were damaged and power supply was cut off. Officials say nearly 100 aftershocks have been felt. Schools have been used as evacuation centers for those affected.
Landslides destroy homes on the island of Bali, killing at least 12 people. Torrential rains caused 3 landslides on the Indonesian island Thursday, February 9th, hitting 3 separate villages on the slopes of Mount Batur. A mother and her 2 young children were killed in one village. A 10-year-old boy was killed in a nearby village. Villages in the area have been evacuated, and rescue teams believe everyone is accounted for. Landslides are common in Indonesia, and they can be quite a threat on some Indonesian islands where many people live in mountainous areas or near rivers. In December, 29 people were killed by flooding and landslides on the Indonesian island of Garut. Bali is expecting more heavy rain on Saturday and Sunday, so the Bali Disaster Mitigation Agency has warned people to be, quote, vigilant about further disasters.
The Hong Kong Free Press says the fire broke out in a train carriage when a passenger ignited what was referred to as dangerous goods. Some of the other passengers were hurt as they rushed out of the carriages at Tsim Sha Tsui station. Hong Kong police have arrested a 40-year-old man who said he set himself on fire to kill others in revenge for the murder of his son.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been gathering in cities right across Iran to mark the anniversary of the 1979 Iranian Revolution.
A nation responding to a call made by its highest authority, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, to take part in the anniversary rallies, especially in light of last week's tweets from the White House. A popular uprising led to an end of the US-backed monarchy and the establishment of an Islamic Republic in 1979.
Some inexperienced figures in the region and America are threatening Iran. They should know that the language of threats has never worked with Iran. They should learn to respect Iran and Iranians. We will strongly confront any warmongering policies.
Khamenei called on Iranians to demonstrate and show they are not afraid of American threats. This refers to Trump putting Iran, quote, on notice and imposing fresh sanctions over a January 29th missile test. Many in the crowd engaged in anti-U.S. and anti-Israel chants. They also burned American flags and effigies of Trump. However, there were some protesters that took a less aggressive tone. Some carried banners that denounced Trump, but supported American protesters who opposed Trump's travel ban. Many Iranians also took to social media using the hashtag #LoveBeyondFlags to condemn flag burning.
The consequences would not only be military and civilian casualties, but also in the religious, economic and political spheres. Iran is a Shia Islamic powerhouse, though Shiites only make up 15% of the entire Muslim population and violently oppose the Sunnis, who make up the majority, including in countries such as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Pakistan and Turkey. Jihadists also follow extreme versions of Sunni Islam and are violently anti-Shia, such as ISIL in Syria and Iraq. So any conflict between Iran and the US could trigger a domino effect, an all-out conflict in the Middle East with alliances forged on religious lines. And then a wider proxy war could follow as the Western countries and other powers back up their Middle East allies. Iran is a member of OPEC and the world's sixth biggest player, producing 3.9 million barrels a day. If Iran's oil reserves were put under threat, the country could literally have the world over a barrel. The whole deal could collapse and oil market chaos could ensue for the other producers and the world's consumers at the petrol pump. Any conflict could see Iran reverse the capping of their atomic program and focus on producing and stockpiling weapons to the fear of Israel and the wider West. It could also ignite a nuclear arms race involving Saudi Arabia and maybe Egypt and Turkey. The big beneficiary of conflict would be the arms producers, but maybe at a devastating cost.
Clearly, war has always been a profitable racket, and that remains the case. And you have members of the U.S. Army and the Pentagon telling U.S. media publications like Politico that there is certainly much profit to be made in any war and in any buildup toward a war.
Is the terrorism chapter, the Trump administration claiming the restraining order on his travel ban puts the country at risk. So how is all of this unfolding on the ground? Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge in Washington with that side of it. Catherine.
Well, thank you, John. According to this government data, since the Seattle judge ordered a stay, nearly 1,200 refugees from the 7 banned nations have been admitted to the U.S., and that represents a 21% increase over mid-January before the president signed the travel ban. Since February 3rd, 1,186 refugees were processed, with about half, 602, from Iraq and Syria, which are home to ISIS and a resurgent al-Qaeda. That is a significant increase in the number of refugee admissions. Let's compare that with the first week of the Trump administration before the travel ban was signed. And we had just over 900 refugees being processed by Homeland Security and the State Department, with about 500 from Iraq and Syria. That region matters because at least 27,000 foreign fighters have gone to Iraq and Syria, with about 30% to date returning home. Western passport holders are really just one flight away from entering the U.S.
This evening, President Trump said he may issue a brand new travel ban next week rather than wait for the courts to make a final ruling on his current ban. Mr. Trump says speed is essential to national security.
We also have a lot of other options, including just filing a brand new order.
Aboard Air Force One today, President Trump vowed he would soon impose tougher screening procedures and possibly a new executive order, adding to comments he made earlier in the day at the White House.
We'll be doing something very rapidly having to do with additional security for our country. You'll be seeing that sometime next week.
Breaking news out of France, where 4 people, including a 16-year-old girl, have been arrested for plotting a terror attack. Explosives on the scene.
This morning, the French Interior Minister saying an imminent terror attack has been foiled after police swooped in and arrested 4 people in the south of France. 3 men aged between 21 and 34 years old, as well as a 16-year-old girl, were detained. 3 are suspected of planning a violent act on French soil. Now, police searching the house where they were arrested found explosives and other equipment, discovering 71 grams of TATP. That's a powerful explosive used by ISIS militants. And it's also the same explosive that was used in the recent deadly Paris and Brussels attacks. The suspects were known to French authorities and were already under surveillance. These latest arrests come a week after a 29-year-old Egyptian man attacked soldiers at the Louvre Museum. This is a country on edge. France is at its highest alert level with hundreds of thousands of police and soldiers on the streets, and it remains under a continuing state of emergency.
A top court in France has struck down a law that banned internet users from regularly consulting terrorist websites. According to several reports out Friday, the 10-member Constitutional Council vetoed the law because it said it unnecessarily violated the people's freedom of communication. The law was approved in June 2016, more than 6 months after terrorist attacks in Paris killed 130 people and injured hundreds more. Anyone found in violation of the law faced 2 years behind bars and a hefty fine. The court's decision to reverse it comes the same day 4 people were arrested in the south of France after police found explosives and bomb-making materials in their possession.
Still in France, the Eiffel Tower is set to undergo a major renovation in response to the threat of terrorism. Authorities in Paris have confirmed plans for the erection of a permanent security barrier around the tower. According to the French daily newspaper Le Parisien, the wall will be made of bulletproof glass and will stand 2.5 meters tall. But the wall will mean tourists will no longer be able to wander freely under the tower and must instead pass through security gates to enter the secure compound.
Antonio Guterres, the new Secretary General of the United Nations, is in Istanbul for a meeting with the Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim. At a press conference in the city, Guterres praised Turkey for keeping its borders open during the biggest migration of people in modern history. He also called for more countries to follow Turkey's humanitarian lead.
I was United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And during that period, Turkey became the largest refugee hosting country in the world. And I have witnessed the enormous generosity of the Turkish government and the Turkish people, opening their borders, their houses and their hearts to their sisters and brothers coming from Syria, but also from many other parts of the world. And this generosity should be matched. This is also the moment to launch an appeal when we see so many borders being closed and when we see so many escaping their responsibilities. This is a moment to appeal for effective burden sharing.
The EU is in danger of losing its soul. Those are the words of Commissioner Frans Timmermans talking about the bloc's response to the Syrian and African refugee crisis. EU leaders promised back in 2015 to relocate 160,000 refugees from Greece and Italy to the bloc's other member states, but only 11,966 have so far been accommodated under the scheme.
There should be more peer pressure among member states so that everybody does their share. And I think it is highly unfair to leave that only to Greece and Italy. I think this should be a collective responsibility of all member states to hold each other accountable for what they agreed to do and what we decided to do.
The 9th progress report on the EU's emergency relocation scheme has just been published. It shows that Austria, Hungary and Poland have not relocated a single refugee despite signing up to the scheme. Slovakia and Czech Republic have only taken in a tiny number as part of the initiative. The lack of unity and solidarity on this issue and many others reinforces the argument that the EU is dysfunctional and could break up, according to analysts.
Well, I think it's a danger. It is a danger. I think certainly, even if it doesn't fall apart, we're going to see a new EU with new priorities. And it's a shame that the EU didn't change before the Brexit vote, because if the EU had changed and had not been so arrogant, I don't think the UK would have voted to leave.
The European Union could suffer another major political defeat next month if, as the polls predict, the Dutch choose Geert Wilders as their next prime minister. Wilders compares the European Union to the end of the Roman Empire, and he says it's only a matter of time until the EU is gone. He sat down for this exclusive interview with CBN's Dale Hurd.
Some say he will be the next nail in the European Union's coffin. Dutch politician Geert Wilders' anti-EU, anti-immigration Party for Freedom is on track to win national elections in March. Why do you think you've become so popular in the Netherlands?
Well, because like with, I'm not comparing myself with Donald Trump or anybody else, but, the people are fed up with politicians ignoring the problems. The people are fed up by if they say something about the influx of the mass immigration from mostly Islamic countries, what they really feel as a threat, what really is a threat, they are being called racist if they make a remark about, hey, this is not our country anymore. Those are common people. Those are not racist or people. And at the same time, people saw, while the government had this enormous austerity measures, that the government spent billions of euros to asylum seekers who really were not asylum seekers, but migrants looking for a better life. And once again, Dale, I don't even blame the people for trying to have a better life here. I blame our government to allow it to happen, to not say enough is enough. You are not a refugee, and we have to defend our own country and close our borders. A country without a border is like a person and a house without a front door. Anybody can enter, and you cannot ask anybody to leave. So it's not a real country at all.
Just the sight of it triggers all kinds of conspiracy theories. All the more so now that Germany has announced it'll bring home some of its gold much earlier than planned. It holds the second biggest bullion reserves in the world, 3,378 tons. It was stashed away in safe havens like Paris and New York during the Cold War, out of Moscow's reach. But with Europe stumbling from crisis to crisis, the German public has grown increasingly nervous about keeping it abroad.
Our stockpiles were accumulated abroad, not here, partly during the economic wonder years. It was stored on-site abroad. It was at no time transferred from Germany.
The move is happening 3 years ahead of schedule, prompting some to question Germany's confidence in the euro. There's speculation that gold could be needed to back a new Deutschmark should the eurozone break up. Only half of Germany's gold will be moved, though. The rest will be kept in the key gold trading markets of London and New York, the Bundesbank insisting that Trump was not a factor in speeding up the schedule. But the relocation hasn't been cheap. So far it's cost nearly 7 million euros. Compared to the 120 billion euros of gold it holds, it's clearly something Germany can afford.
For more than 7 years, Boko Haram has terrorized northeastern Nigeria. At the peak of its insurgency, the militants were ranked among the bloodiest terrorist organizations in the world. But that seems to be changing. Over the past few months, Boko Haram has been on the back foot. Most of the territories it previously controlled, including the Sambisa Forest, its stronghold, have been recaptured by government forces. And the UN Security Council briefing now suggests the group is plagued by financial difficulties and internal power struggles. Boko Haram's main source of funding has been difficult to determine, but the group is known to have forcefully collected revenue from areas it controls. While ISIL seeks to expand its influence in West Africa through existing terrorist organizations, it could be one source of Boko Haram's funding. But ISIL, too, has been under pressure. The UN has warned against underestimating the militants' capacity to wreak more havoc. But security experts here believe a lack of resources and its concentration on softer targets signals an end to Boko Haram. Boko Haram has killed more than 20,000 people and displaced millions, leaving in its wake what the UN describes as Africa's worst humanitarian crisis.
Russia intervened to stop a clash between Syrian government forces and Turkey-backed Syrian rebels in northern Syria. This was the first confrontation between them as they fight Islamic State in the area. IS is under attack from separate campaigns in northern Syria by Russian-backed government forces and Turkey-backed rebels. The Syria and Turkey clash was near the ISIS-held city of Al-Bab. It underlined the risk of the parallel offenses starting new fighting between the government and its rebel enemies. Russia and Turkey have both backed opposing sides in the war, but recently started cooperating over Syria.
According to recent information gathered by U.S. intelligence, Russia is considering turning over Edward Snowden as a gift to Donald Trump, who has called the NSA leaker a spy and a traitor. According to former Deputy National Security Advisor Juan Zarete, the deal would be a win-win for Russia, saying not only would it signal warmer relations and a desire for greater cooperation with the new administration, it would also probably stoke controversies in cases in the U.S. around the role of surveillance, the role of the U.S. intelligence community, and the future of privacy and civil liberties in the United States.
For the first time in decades, archaeologists say they have found another cave they believe once held Dead Sea Scrolls. A team of scientists was excavating a cave near the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea when they discovered pretty much everything except a completed scroll. The long list of uncovered items includes smashed jars, a piece of blank parchment, cloth used to wrap scrolls, and a leather strap that would have bound a scroll together. Archaeologists say the cave was most likely looted, considering they found a pair of pickaxe heads from the 1950s. As one of the team members told the Washington Post, "Thank God they took only the scrolls. They left behind all the evidence that the scrolls were there." Until now, scientists thought only 11 caves had contained Dead Sea Scrolls, which are historically, religiously, and linguistically important. The first scrolls were discovered in the late 1940s. It's unclear who wrote them, but some scholars believe a Jewish sect known as the Essenes may have been responsible. Archaeologists say they will continue excavating in the desert northwest of the Dead Sea in the hopes of finding more ancient treasures.
There's new information out about how Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, does business. Former employees say the organization pressures clinics to meet abortion quotas by encouraging distressed women to have abortions. Oftentimes, employees were awarded with pizza parties and paid time off for hitting their goal of abortions that month. Former employees say they were trained how to convince women that abortion was their only option, and it's been going on for years. Pro-life activist Lila Rose tweeted this image of a Planned Parenthood award given to a clinic that aborted more babies than it had in the previous year. Pro-life activists expect Planned Parenthood to deny these claims.
In an op-ed for National Geographic this week, Melinda Gates, the wife of tech magnate Bill Gates, says that she wants to provide contraceptive options to 120 million women around the world by 2020. The issue of birth control has been a focus for Gates since 2012, when she co-chaired the Family Planning 2020 Summit, a global event that brought leaders from around the world together to discuss ways to grant women easy access to contraception. In her op-ed, Gates wrote, "In 2012, we made a promise to women around the world. Our actions over the next 3 years will decide whether we keep it."